It is the Being Freelance podcast, and we are live for episode 300! Yes, we are live in the Being Freelance community, and our guest this week is freelance graphic designer Liz Mosley. Hey, Liz!
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
I'm very deafening roar, wasn't it?
It was deafening. I think you'll just hear me giggling in the background.
As ever, how about we get started hearing how you got started being freelance?
Awesome. I was thinking about this, and I never managed to answer these sort of questions without doing like a really waffly like life history. So I'll try and keep it succinct. But my first taste of freelance was while I was at university. So I studied graphic design, and basically a friend of mine worked for a charity, and they needed an annual report, and they asked me to do it. And I can't believe they asked me to do it, because at that point I didn't even know how to use InDesign. So that was how I learned to do InDesign, designing an annual report for this charity. So that was like my first taste of freelance life. But weirdly, when I came out of university, I was adamant that I didn't want to be freelance. I just thought it wasn't for me. You know, I decided to move to London, and I had various jobs. So I worked in an agency for a bit. I worked in-house at university, and I did those, was still like, no, freelance isn't for me. But then basically the sister of one of my colleagues at the university was setting up a boutique clothing shop in Peckham, and she needed branding, and they like adamantly wanted me to do it. I was like, oh no, I haven't really got enough time. And they were like, no, we want you to do it. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did it, and I had a great time, and I really enjoyed it. And so that sort of started to give me, I guess, like, yeah, more of a taste, got me hungry for the freelance life. So what I did was I started my own stationery shop. So I was doing like little bits of branding for people. I wanted to design stuff that wasn't for clients, that I could just design for my taste, my style. And then if anyone wanted to buy them, great, no big deal.
Yeah, I love that. Then, I've not got time to go freelance, but I know. I'll start a freelance. I'll start a business designing and selling stationery.
I know. So I did that. Really got involved with the sort of small business maker like scene in London, and would do like craft fairs and all that kind of thing. Had a great time doing that, and decided as that picked up that I would go down to 4 days a week at work and then have 1 day a week freelance, which was amazing that I was able to do that. So I did that, and then got pregnant and I had a baby. So while I was on maternity leave, I was able to sort of like keep just doing little bits on my shop, but it was quite nice because there was no client. So there's no deadline. I could just do bits as and when I could. If I couldn't do anything, the bare minimum I had to do was like post out orders, which was quite easy to do. I wasn't getting loads of orders, so it was quite easy to do, like a little trip to the post office with the baby kind of thing. But after my maternity leave was coming to an end, we decided to leave London and move to Cardiff. So I decided that I wouldn't look for another job and that I would go freelance at that point, mainly because I was getting more clients. I was doing the stationery thing that was sort of growing a bit, and I could fit it in around having a kid, basically. So that was kind of the motivation, I guess, for it. But it was quite nice because it felt like a very gradual ease into it. So it wasn't like I just suddenly went freelance. Like I'd been building it up a little bit, doing little bits on the side. And then I had another kid. And after that maternity leave ended, decided that I didn't have enough time to do the branding work and the online, like the stationery shop. So I needed to pick one and go all in, because I felt like if I wanted to take them to the next level, like I either needed to like go gung-ho with the like wholesale for the product-based business, or I needed to really start, like promoting myself as a branding designer. So I made the decision to go for it as a branding designer. So that was like 3 to 4 years ago. And so since then I've been really going for it freelance, and have actually got out of thinking of them as hobby businesses and taking it really seriously and building an actual business that is making me money. And yeah, now I would properly call myself a freelancer. And now I don't think I could ever go back. Like I honestly don't think I could work for anyone ever again. Because now I love being freelance, which I just think is hilarious, because I was so adamantly anti going freelance when I came out of university.
Amazing. So when you said that you wanted to take it next level, what did next level look like to you?
I think I recognized that I was treating my businesses like a hobby, like I wasn't taking them very seriously. So it was things like just getting like things properly set up, like having proper contracts for my clients, charging, reassessing my prices. I think probably income, like the amount of income was like a marker for me as to how seriously I was taking the business. Like I wanted it to be something, especially when I had the product-based business, a lot of the money just went back into the business to buy more stock. So I wanted it to be something where I was actually paying myself like a decent amount of money. Like I was, contributing to supporting my family, basically. So I think those were a few of the things that made me feel like, okay, I'm taking this seriously now. I'm getting systems in place to run this business like properly, not just very sort of like ad hoc, just little bits all over the place.
Yeah. So what were those things then? So contracts,
yeah.
Like what made that difference?
Contracts was a big one for me. I think like increasing my prices a lot. I think taking marketing seriously. So at around that time, I did a marketing course. And I think before that, I'd just been playing on Instagram, and that was it. I never had a strategy or a plan, or really thought about how it could help my business or support my business beyond, I'll post a picture of this card, maybe some people will buy it, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that the marketing piece was a big one for me.
In that case, let's talk about marketing. So what did you? In fact, so your first clients came through. Let's rewind to the first clients bit. So there was the people you knew.
Yeah.
There were...
A lot of it was word of mouth at that point, so, or like people recommending me to others. So I would say the whole time that I was employed, I was doing little bits of design stuff for friends. It was very sort of like a bit here and a bit there, like the annual report, an album cover for a friend, a logo for, the sister of a colleague, that kind of thing. At that point, my Instagram had always been very much around the product-based business. So I started to change that round and share more about the branding, and really start talking about that a lot more. But yeah, so I did this marketing course, and I think it just made me actually think about, how I was putting myself out there, thinking of myself as a brand, I guess, like how I was putting myself out there online. Who was I trying to attract? How was I going to communicate with them? Where were they hanging out? All of that kind of thing. And I feel like it's not been, like an overnight thing. It's been a very sort of slow, steady working it out as I go. But I feel like it's working for me now.
So when you figured, who am I trying to attract? Who am I trying to work at? Who were you trying to work with?
Well, so having sort of been in the small business creative maker scene in London, those were the people that I just loved working with. And so I really positioned myself as a branding designer for small businesses. And so part of that was I was offering, obviously, like done for you services. So I would create their branding, but I also started talking to, I guess I had a lot of inquiries from people who had started a business, but maybe didn't have the budget to outsource their branding, or like just weren't at that point yet where they felt comfortable to spend thousands of pounds on branding. And so I started talking to those people, but creating content for them in a different way. So things like the podcast, I have done a course called Design Your Own Branding, specifically like aimed at them. So like giving them the process and the tools so that they could create something that they could use themselves. So yeah, sort of teaching, I guess more teaching, like doing lots of workshops. And I've done that as well for other people. So teaching for other people's memberships. But yeah, it feels like it's all quite aligned quite nicely around small business owners.
So did the course come about because you had people who were coming to you but couldn't afford to hire you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's how it started. Basically, it started off as a workshop. So I did a workshop that was like, I guess like teaching the basics of branding for a small business. But there's like, you can hardly cover anything in like an hour and a half workshop when it comes to branding. So it was really fast paced. And I felt like it wasn't maybe the best format for it to be. So I decided to flesh it out into a longer course. And that's actually worked really well. And people have had really lovely results from it. And I've had like lovely testimonials about it. I think that's worked well. So I feel like I've kind of got all these different strands, but they all kind of align quite nicely together.
And the podcast. So you launched a podcast when? 2019, are you saying?
No. The podcast happened, it was at the beginning of 2021.
Oh, right.
So 2021. So I've like been doing it for just over 2 years now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's called
Building Your Brand.
I mean, what's been your experience of doing the podcast? Like, did you know what the hell you were doing?
The saying, all the gear and no idea. I would say that like really sums me up. So I bought like a fancy microphone, sort of not that fancy headphones. And basically I did a skill swap with my podcast producer, who's called Lucy Bucraft and is brilliant. And it was something that I'd wanted to do, but just had never sort of spent the time working out how to do it. And she really encouraged me to just go for it. And the thing that was really nice about it is that when we were talking about it, I just had all the ideas. You know, she was like, one of the things that you need to think about is, do you have enough ideas like for content to keep the podcast going? And that was never an issue for me. I was like, yeah, I mean, there's like a million people I want to interview, so many things I want to chat about. And so it all sort of came together quite easily. So we did a skill swap, and she like edited my first sort of 12 episodes for me, and I did it in a season at that point. And I was like, well, I'll just give it a try. If I don't like it, I've done one season, I can just park it and leave it. And it, you know, it's like evergreen content. There's kind of like no harm kind of thing. But obviously, turns out I loved it, and it is probably one of my favorite things that I've done in my business. So like, it's still going strong now. Now I don't do it in seasons. I do weekly episodes. I am going to take a break, I think, over the summer, just because I feel like I need to not be always recording podcast episodes. But yeah, again, it's like worked really well for me. I don't know about you, but I think podcasting is quite a hard one to like quantify in terms of knowing exactly how many people, like, is it bringing me clients? Like, it's hard to measure that. But I definitely have people who have found me and mentioned the podcast. So I think it has worked how I wanted it to in terms of marketing. That's not the only reason that I do it. And lots of other sort of amazing things have come out of it as well. And I absolutely love it.
How do you make time for that? Like each week, you know, it is a big commitment.
Yeah, I mean, podcasting, I had no idea how much work went into it. Like, it really is a lot of work. And I outsource the editing because I was like, I can't. I know that I could sit down and learn how to do it, but I wasn't that interested in doing it. So I was like, well, this is the perfect thing to outsource. So I decided to outsource it like right from the beginning. I now pay Lucy to do it. We're not skill swapping
Constantly rebranding her business.
Yeah. Oh, you want another look? Yeah, totally. Just forever rebranding. One of the things that I did, which has been a game changer, is I automated a lot of the processes. So one of the things with having guests, and you probably find this as well, is that there's like a lot of admin. So, you know, like going back and forth, booking a time, all that kind of thing. So I basically created like canned emails for every part of that process and an automated scheduler. So like, all I have to do is approach them. And once they've said yes, then they go through this automated email system that basically does everything for me right up until we record. So that has saved me, I reckon, hours and hours. And then the other thing that I tend to do is sort of batch record. So if I've got a quieter period of work, then I'll schedule a whole bunch of them in and just get them batch record, and then Lucy just will have them ready to go, like, to edit weekly. So that's sort of how I've made it work. I mean, I think it's one of those classic things where if it's something that you enjoy, it's quite easy to make time for it. And so it doesn't feel that hard for me to do, in that I really enjoy it. So I fit it in.
And you said it's brought you lots of amazing things.
Well, I say lots. The main one has been a ongoing relationship working with Adobe, which has been incredible. So that's kind of like a bit of a roundabout story. But basically, I guess it was just over a year ago, posted on stories on my Instagram, oh, you know, I'm looking for a podcast like sponsor. if anyone's like knows anything or is interested, get in touch. And this, I didn't know this, but a guy from the UK marketing team of Adobe was following me, and he messaged me being like, oh yeah, send over the info. And I was like, oh my goodness. Anyway, I sent over the info to him. I didn't even have the info together at that point. So I was like, oh my goodness. So I had to like put it all together, sent it over to him. Didn't really expect anything to happen because I was fairly certain that my podcast wasn't the sort of size that would interest Adobe, which was correct. But it's all a bit roundabout. So basically, he recommended me to his colleague to become an ambassador for Adobe Express, which is something that I now am and I do. And then off the back of that, I got recommended to become part of the Adobe Live team. So I have a weekly show on Adobe Live every Monday. So basically just have this ongoing relationship with Adobe, which although it isn't sort of like, they didn't sponsor the podcast, I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for the podcast. So I credit the podcast for it.
That's amazing. And just because you put it out there, like you never know who's watching. Instantly, what was his name? What was
I'll send you his handle later. I think he doesn't work in marketing anymore.
What's the...
I know.
No, that's so cool though. So you're an Adobe Express ambassador. What does that entail?
So it means that I regularly promote Adobe Express. So it looks like all sorts of different things. It could be, like a reel on Instagram, like a sponsored content basically, but it can be in all sorts of different types of formats. So they have sponsored a few episodes of the podcast, which is really nice. I also got to go to LA to their annual conference called Adobe Max, which was awesome. So that was really fun. They had like an Adobe Express ambassador pre-conference. So got to meet, like they have ambassadors all over the world. So we all got together for that. And then as part of the Adobe Live team, basically there's like an ongoing sort of running program of creatives sharing their process and how they work, which is really cool. And it's all free to consume. It's on Behance and YouTube. And so I do a weekly show about Adobe Express. So I do half an hour every Monday, and every Monday tackle a different project basically. And people can follow along and watch. And again, it's really nicely aligned because Adobe Express and, doing the demos is all around supporting and helping small businesses and helping them create their, like Adobe Express is helping them to create their own designs if they don't have the budget to pay a designer, or, helping them make social media content quicker. That it's also encouraging creatives who sometimes struggle with their own marketing, like here's a way that you can sort of integrate this tool into your workflow, into your processes to help things speed up basically.
Wow. And I guess it all elevates your brand, like your reputation with your potential customers too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been really great for my profile. I got to, it's all very sort of like serendipitous, all these things, like how it all comes about. But I basically got to do a digital talk for the Adobe Max conference. So they have like the in-person stuff, but then they also had a whole conference that was like pre-recorded talks online. So I did one of those, and then a design magazine from Germany saw it, got in touch with me, and were like, can we interview you for our magazine? So it's all been incredible for raising my profile, connecting with other creatives, getting myself in front of a whole different audience, which has been really cool.
Amazing. So that came out of the podcast. How else are you marketing yourself out there, putting yourself out there? So you got the podcast?
I got the podcast. I got my email mailing list. I've got Instagram and TikTok. I would say those are my main. I am on Twitter and LinkedIn, but like very half-heartedly. Okay. I always have like, I have like dreams of, I've also got a YouTube channel, again, very half-hearted. I have dreams of like focusing energy on those, but realistically, I just can't. I have to accept that I can't do it all. So those aren't ones that I'm really focusing on at the moment.
So what are you doing on Instagram? And is it the same as what you're doing on TikTok?
I treat them differently. I think my Instagram's a bit more a bit more curated is what I'm trying to say. So a bit more thought through. TikTok, I think you can be a bit more scrappy and you can just do sort of ad hoc videos. That's probably not the best advice or the best strategy, but that's what I'm doing with that. And I have had some accidental success with that. So I did have one video that went viral. Everyone who listens to my podcast is probably sick of me talking about it. But yeah, I had one video that accidentally went viral and got a whole bunch of followers off the back of that. So TikTok, I feel like I'm less familiar with, so I'm still kind of playing around with that. But I've seen, for other people, I've seen some incredible results, and I think it is a really interesting platform to explore. So yeah.
And so what are you putting on? Is it more like an extension of that tutorial aspect, that helping people to brand themselves? Is it that sort of thing?
Less so with the helping people. Yeah, some branding tips, a lot of like pattern tutorials, like tips in Illustrator, or, like just design tips, websites that people might find helpful, my thoughts on design trends, stuff like that. I'm not probably consistent enough with my sort of content type yet there, because, probably consistency is what's going to make it work better. But I think it's a really interesting platform. So yeah, it's a variety of sort of more edited, well thought through videos, and then more stuff that is almost like what you'd post on Instagram stories. So sort of things that you're thinking, what you're up to, day in the life, that kind of thing.
Right. And then your email.
Yes. I've surprised myself and actually been really consistent with that. So I think the two marketing things I'm most consistent with are the podcast and the email. So I usually send out a weekly email. And again, it's sort of it's a mix. It's kind of like a behind the scenes, it's like, this is what I'm thinking. A lot of it's quite honest behind the scenes of my business, how I'm finding things, what I'm learning, recommending, stuff that I found that I think people might find useful. And I really enjoy that as well, and have seen like good results with that. So I've found that especially helpful when selling my courses, or like one of the things that I've been exploring a bit more is affiliate marketing. So sharing, like I'm very determined that I'll only promote things that I would have promoted anyway. But, so many people now have affiliate links. It's quite easy to do that. And I've had a bit of success with that. I think when sort of 3 years ago, when I started taking my freelance business seriously, one of the things that I wanted to do, and probably the pandemic inspired this as well, is diversify my income. So I didn't want to just be reliant on finding clients. So that sort of the affiliate stuff fits in that, the courses, I'm not very good at picking one thing and doing it.
No, but that's great. So as in you like to have that kind of broad, like rather, because you kind of have a niche in your, like who your audience is. You've said small businesses, for example.
I think that's the thing that's nice about it. And I think part of this is intentional, and part of this is probably, if I'm honest, happy sort of accident. Or maybe I should give myself credit. I think it is quite intentional, but I feel like my audience is really consistent and is very similar across the board. I just sort of find different ways to speak to them and help them, and not all of them are me doing branding for them. That's probably like 50% of it, and then the other 50% is made up of whole host of different things. And I think I just love trying different things. I think part of the reason I love marketing is that I like to see it as a big experiment. And so I love just trying things and seeing what happens. And I find that really fun. It makes my work life way more fun and interesting for me, I think.
I really hope you're enjoying Liz's story. She's so great, isn't she? This episode of the Being Freelance podcast was streamed live into the community. If you're watching this and you're a freelancer, I bet you'd love the community too. Come and join us. Go to beingfreelance.com/community and come on inside. It feels so good to know that you're not alone being freelance, to hang out with other freelancers from around the world, to cheer each other on, to brainstorm ideas, to have a laugh, frankly, in your day, rather than just sitting there alone. We do virtual co-working. We have meetups, both online and in person. What else do we do? Oh, sometimes we do live podcasts like this one, and also the Freelance Disco. But I can't stress enough that it's not just about me doing things like this, but it's about you connecting with other freelancers. And sometimes that might bring you work, but sometimes that might just bring you that great feeling that you're just not going through each day alone. Come find us. Go to beingfreelance.com, where, as well as the course and 300 episodes of the podcast and blog articles, you will find a button that says community. Click that and I'll see you in there. Okay, back to the podcast. One thing I did notice when I was trying to check out your TikTok, the title was it 100 rejection challenge?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, I'm intrigued. What's your rejection challenge?
So I feel like I'm not very good at dealing with rejection, or I probably don't put myself in situations where I think I'm going to get rejected. And so I realized that was holding me back. So I think I'm the sort of person that works better if I gamify everything. So basically I set myself a challenge to get 100 rejections in 6 months. Like, from a work perspective, I just want to, I feel like I just need to, because...
Not just walking down the street saying,
But there's loads of people on TikTok who are doing that. So loads of people on TikTok like go out into the street and ask strangers to sing a duet with them or something, and then film it for TikTok, and that's the rejection they're seeking. So I felt like I needed to clarify that is not what I was going to be doing. But yeah, and I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks. So it was inspired by a friend of mine who is an illustrator called Katie. She's Katie Draws on Instagram. Her name's Katie Chappell, and she did something similar where she called it 100 no's, which is actually like a friendlier way to put it. But she did the same challenge basically. So I stole it from her. I think it's quite a common thing, and there's like a TED talk about similar things, and I've seen other people doing it. But yes, I set myself this challenge, and the idea being that it would just sort of take a bit of the pressure off. And actually, if I did get a rejection, it's not as big a deal because, I can just add it to my list, for the challenge. Like, there was actually like a purpose with it. And it's making me pitch for things that I would have held back from pitching for in the past. So a lot of it is going to be like podcast related. So I've pitched for approached some much bigger names to be on my podcast. I'm pitching myself to be on other podcasts. So actually, hilariously, I'll find the spreadsheet to show you. On my list of rejections to seek was pitching to be on your podcast. And then before I got a chance to, you emailed me and asked me to be on it. And so I was just like, amazing. But
wow.
Yeah.
So hang on though. Would that have been good if I'd have said no? Because then you'd have got
good. Yeah.
Because then you'd have got the rejection. But okay, so I sort of thwarted that. I'm sorry. If we meet in the street, you can ask me to sing a duet and I'll turn you down. How about that?
I mean, ultimately, I want to get yeses. Like, that is the whole goal of it. But the idea, I guess, is I'm asking more people. And so the chances of getting yeses, I'll get more yeses as a result. And so far, the challenge is going horribly because I've got more yeses than nos. But actually, the challenge is going amazingly because it's having the exact result that I hoped, which was that I would put myself out there for more stuff, and things would happen. So I'm basically going to keep going for 6 months, and then me and Katie, who I mentioned before, are going to record a podcast episode and sort of share our experience of the whole challenge. But I have had some rejections, and I feel like I'm handling them better. So even that is a good result as well.
Oh my God, I love it. Absolutely love it. You say you're quite competitive. So do you often set yourself like challenges?
I feel like I'm not competitive with other people. I'm just
internally.
I'm like internally competitive. Yeah. I think I'm not very good if I don't have like a deadline or a goal or something that I'm working towards. So I think setting challenges, where I can sort of like document it and I know what I need to do, really helps me. I think that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned being freelance is how much understanding yourself and how you work is like really important. And I would never have predicted, or I would have never guessed sort of like how much self-work I would have to do in running my own business and being freelance. So I think, I'm recognizing how I work best, what motivates me, and setting myself like these challenges is definitely one. So like another one that I do, which isn't really a challenge it's more just like an ongoing project, but it's a pattern challenge. So every week there's me and a friend of mine create prompts, and we design a pattern every week, and we post it on Instagram, and then other people have started to join us, which is awesome. So yeah, I mean, that those sort of things help me to do things consistently, and I feel like I need that. I need some tricks and tips to help me get stuff done.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's really good. It's interesting you say about, like that sort of self-reflection. Do you think having the podcast has helped you do that? I know you interview other people, but like analysing your business or how you work.
Yeah, definitely it has helped. I think one of the things that I've noticed it's helped me with is become really clear on what's important to me, or what I like, my sort of beliefs around running a business. I guess not like it's particularly right or wrong, but just like what I want to talk about and what I think is important. Because what I notice is that a lot of this sort of similar themes come up in multiple episodes. And so I think that it's really helped with that, in clarifying to me what I think is important in building brands, in running a business, and what I want to communicate to others, like how I want to share that. And thankfully, most of my guests are really aligned with that. And that's why the same themes sort of come out a lot of the time. But yeah, I think chatting to other people, I mean, a lot of podcasting for me is selfish, and I just get to talk to interesting people and learn, from their insight and their perspective. So, a lot of the time it'll be like, okay, I need to learn about Pinterest. Who can I interview about Pinterest? That kind of thing.
Did you know, like, what you were doing business? Obviously, you've evolved your business, you think about your business and so forth. But, like, for example, when it came to pricing and stuff like that, like, did you know what you were doing? How have you got on with that?
Oh my goodness. I think I will forever find pricing difficult. And I think I have really struggled with underpricing myself a lot. And probably a lot of people would say that I still underprice myself. I'm a lot happier with my prices now. And I feel like I've gotten much better at consistently putting them up. So I'll sort of like review them every like 6 months and put them up. But yeah, I mean, that is something that I've always struggled with. And actually sort of going back to the knowing yourself sort of piece of it, I think I've had to do like a lot of sort of digging around. I think there's sort of like a lot of, without this turning into a therapy session, I think there's sort of like a lot of issues that I've had to unpick that have then fed into why I've priced myself too low in the past. And I think part of it was before I was thinking, going back to what we were talking about, I was thinking of it as a hobby business. And so when you have that attitude, it's really hard to price yourself correctly. And I think as soon as I got out of that way of thinking, it became much easier to price myself better and in a like more sustainable way. Like this can actually be a profitable business way. I think it's something that I'm always going to struggle with though, and have to work through, like will always be working on. I think one of the things that I have noticed that's helped me is a few jobs where I've underpriced myself. By the end of the project, I really resented doing the work. And that's been interesting for me because that's been a very clear sign. Okay, I did not price myself right because I obviously don't feel like I'm being paid the right amount. And that's helped me work out what should be the right amount for me anyway. And I think that's the thing, is like no one can really tell you. There's not like one size fits all. Like, yes, you can get advice. There's lots of great organizations that'll give you advice about what sort of prices to charge in your industry. But there's so many factors that impact it, like where you live, how much you want to earn, what type of clients you're trying to attract. And so I think that's the thing that's quite tricky about it. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed about diversifying my income is that it means that I can still price myself in a way that I can attract the clients that I want to work with, which is small businesses, but that's not my only income. So I'm almost like supplementing it with other things that I'm doing that aren't so much I'm selling my time for money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how about, because right very early on in this story, you had a child, then you had another one. Like, how have you found work-life balance, working and living? How's that going?
I mean, not great, I'll be honest. No. Well, in some senses, amazing. Like, I really love the life that I've built for myself, in the sense that I really appreciate the flexibility I have being self-employed. So the fact that if my kid's sick, I can, look after them. It's still a juggle, right? Because there's deadlines and clients and stuff, but I'm not having to sort of like ask someone's permission to be at home with my kid when they're sick. I'm not having to ask permission to go to their like school play, all of those sort of things. I really love that I'm in control and I can plan my workload around them and what they need and what we need and all that kind of thing. The area that I'm struggling with and not doing so well is the boundaries. So obviously when you run your own business, it's really hard to mentally switch off from it. And because at the moment I work from home, that blurs the boundary even more, because it's always tempting to be like, oh, I just need to quickly go and reply to this email, or I just need to do this, I just need to do that. So that's something that I'm working on at the moment, is how to, be present with the thing that I'm doing. So if I'm working, be present and focus on working. And if I'm with the kids, be present and focus on them. And I feel like that's something, that I have struggled with. I'm getting better at it, but I think, it's a work in progress.
Now, Liz, I always do this thing where I ask for 3 facts about yourself to make 2 true, 1 a lie, and let me figure out the lie. What do you have for me?
Okay, so the first one is, the TV show Narcos?
Well, I used to be a drug runner. Okay, go on.
I have met and visited the house of one of the people who is portrayed in the show. So not the actor, the actual mafioso from the TV show. So that's one.
Okay, yep.
Number 2 is that I applied to be on The Apprentice and got quite far in the process, but then pulled out because I decided that I didn't want to do it. Mainly because I realized I didn't want Alan Sugar to invest in my business. And then the third one is that I once pretended to be an extra on a film set so that I could meet Mel Gibson.
Okay. When you're auditioning to be on The Apprentice, was this while you were freelance, pre-freelance? Like, when was this?
It was like early days. So it was when I'd started doing freelance stuff and like had my stationery business, but pre-kids.
Oh, I see. So it might have been investing in your stationery business. Obviously, The Apprentice goes out around the world. Here in the UK, our version of Donald Trump is Alan Sugar, who is a businessman. Okay, Narcos. How did you meet a mafioso?
So my mum is Colombian and we were over visiting family, and she decided that she wanted to go and visit the house that she grew up in like years ago. And then we went over and it was this guy who was basically one of Pablo Escobar's pals living in the house that she grew up in as a kid.
Lives in the house that your mother grew up in?
I mean, I think he bought another house. Like, he's extended, he's made it bigger. But yeah, basically.
That is cool. If it's true. Okay, now, this is the one we all want to explore. You pretended to be an extra to get onto a film set with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Right, so what was the film?
Oh, do you know what? I can't even remember. So basically, I was visiting some friends in Boston. So when we were there, he was filming a car chase on the streets of Boston. And they'd put a note through my friend's door being like, oh, we're filming this film at these times. So we were like, oh, let's go down and have a look. And then we went down there and we could see him. And there were just all these people loitering around. So we basically just sort of like shuffled over and joined the crowd of people loitering, realized that they were extras. And then Mel Gibson was right there. And so I was like, okay, this is my chance. Like, I have to go and introduce myself. And I went, I mean, this is embarrassing to admit. I sort of sidled up to him and was like, hi. And I basically panicked. And so I just said, I'm Welsh. And he was like, okay, great. And that was it.
Oh my God, I hope this is true. You had one chance to speak to Mel Gibson and you just said, I'm Welsh.
I know. Yeah, it's awful. It's awful.
Liz, I'm torn. I mean, I don't know whether your mother is Colombian or not. Could you have been? I don't know. I feel like you're too nice to be on The Apprentice, and they're all so self-inflated. I can't believe you would have even got past the first round. You seem too sane, too pleasant, too self-reflective. Yeah, you need a much bigger ego to go.
I've changed a lot in the last 6 years.
Oh, I was a nightmare back then. And then the extra with Mel Gibson, there was a real beauty in the embarrassment that you had. There's a lot of Mel Gibson. Oh, there's an excellent Mel Gibson gif just gone into the chat where we're doing this live into the Being Freelance community. Okay, what do you reckon, everybody? Claire says The Apprentice is the lie. Elizabeth says The Apprentice is a lie. I mean, I've got to say, I am going towards The Apprentice. I hope you take this the right way, Liz. Like, if you applied to be on Bake Off, I can see you on Bake Off. I can't see you getting through The Apprentice first levels because you're just not awful enough. The Apprentice is the lie.
That is the lie, yeah. Oh, yes! I didn't come up with a good enough lie.
Now
I've just told the whole world my embarrassing Mel Gibson story. So
I love that. I mean, who wouldn't say that to Mel Gibson? I did prefer the idea of you wandering into the back of Braveheart or something.
Yeah, that would have been better.
Just because that would have involved full war paint in order to pretend to be an extra, just to say you're Welsh. Liz, if you could tell your younger self one thing about being freelance, what would that be?
I think it would be to keep going and to just do things in your own time. Like, I spent a lot of my first few years of freelance feeling really frustrated because I felt behind and I felt like I was looking at what everybody else was doing. And I just felt like I was nowhere near where they were, but so much can happen. So much has changed for me in the last 3 years. So much can change. And so I think it would just be to keep going and to just trust in the sort of timing of your business and the journey that you're on.
I love that. Liz, it's been so good talking to you. Now, guys, do you have a question that, you've been listening to Liz's story, maybe you already follow Liz or listen to her podcast and you've got a question that you'd like to ask Liz. Right, okay, Angie's joining. You're on the podcast.
Liz, you are totally awesome and you're totally brilliant and I've loved hearing about your journey and it seems that you've done brilliantly. Did you do it all by yourself or did you have help along the way? Did you have a coach or did you have awesome freelancers around you or did you just wing it and do it yourself? That's my question.
Definitely didn't do it by myself. Like, I've definitely had lots of support. So I did have a coach for a while called Susie Dark, who's amazing. And basically my course would never have come out if it wasn't for her because I had so many crises about it. And she basically helped me get it over, actually get it over the line. So that she helped me at that particular period of time. I think the other thing that I would say is I have been really lucky in that I've had some amazing freelance small biz friends who I basically voice note all the time. We really support. I guess we coach each other effectively, not at all in any sort of formal way, but we just help each other. So a few that I would say would be so who I actually learned a lot about marketing from was Moneksha Stewart, who's a friend of mine. She's been amazing. I'm in a membership at the moment with Hannah. I always say her name wrong, which is terrible because she's a really good friend of mine. Hannah Isted, I think, or Isted. Oh my goodness, she's going to kill me. But she's got a really lovely membership called The Best 90 Days Ever. And she does a little marketing prompt every day. And we WhatsApp all the time and help each other out with our businesses. So I definitely feel like I've had lots of support from people around me.
Brilliant.
Amazing. That was a great question, Ange.
Really good question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Ange.
Can I go now? Oh,
yeah, you go.
Well done. Brilliant.
Bye. That was Ange.
That was
cool. Elizabeth is joining us now. Okay, we've got another question from the Being Freelance community. Hi, Elizabeth. What's your question for Liz?
So you've done lots of things that have been really successful. And what I wanted to know is have you done something that was a really bad mistake, but actually turned out to be really helpful?
Also, have you made
that's
a
a
mistake
really
in
good
your
question.
business?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
in hindsight, it's been good.
I feel like I've made tons, to be honest. I definitely feel like the whole thing is like a real big learning process. I think two spring to mind. One idea I had a while ago was to create like semi-customizable logos. So the logo, like the branding was sort of like pre-designed, and then people could sort of like buy it off the shelf and like put their like their business information in it, and it was like unique, one of a kind, you know. So a lot of people do this on Etsy, but they sell the logo like millions of times, whereas this wasn't like that. And I spent ages making it all and then didn't really tell anyone anything about it, and it was an utter flop. And I think I think it worked out for the best because my heart obviously wasn't really in it, and that's why I didn't really tell anyone about it. And so I think it was like, now I look back on it and I'm like, oh, actually, I'm really glad I didn't go down that route. But it was like good to, I guess, try it. I think another thing would be, I had an experience a couple of years ago where I had a couple of client situations where, on reflection, looking back, like they weren't the right fit for me, and there were sort of like red flags that came up. Not that there was anything wrong with them, but just that I should have picked up on as into why I wasn't the right fit for them. And then like the project didn't go well, or one of them decided to stop the project sort of before it finished. And I found that incredibly hard at the time, but it probably had the most impact on my business in terms of the improvements that I made off the back of that. So like improvements in my processes, improvements in how I communicated with clients. And I would say like it had a much bigger impact than any job that's gone very well, if that makes sense.
Excellent question, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Do you know, just to go go a little bit further, I guess, on that whole, you know, like the coach or support, so it's a mix of things that you pay for and people you've found along the way, sort of thing?
Yeah, I would say so. So like I paid for the coaching, and I paid to be like, I'm in the Doing It for the Kids membership. I'm in like Hannah's membership that I talked about. So getting support those ways. And then I think, people that have just become real life friends. I think a lot of the people who are physically around me don't really understand the nitty-gritty of like my business and what I do. So it's just having those people that really get it, and that I can just like WhatsApp message. I'd say like another one is my podcast producer Lucy. Like, yes, I pay her, but we've also become friends, and we also sort of help each other in our businesses as well. And so we'll just like WhatsApp each other and be like, oh, I've got this idea, what do you think? Oh, I've written this, does it sound ridiculous? You know, just little things like that, or sort of throughout the day. I guess they're kind of like my colleagues over voice note. Obviously you've got to find people that enjoy voice notes as well, because not everybody does, but I'm quite lucky that I found fellow voice note lovers who are happy to chat to me all day long.
Well, honestly, Liz, I could chat to you all day long. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Go to beingfreelance.com. There is links through as there are for all of our 300 guests. All of them, you can find them, you can listen again, and you can go and say hi to them if you've enjoyed this, reached out to Liz, listen to Liz's podcast. We'll put a link to that because it really is a great podcast. Go find that as well. And I can't wait to hear on the podcast how that like the 100 rejections goes when that podcast episode comes out as well. Plus, you mentioned Doing It for the Kids community. It's a podcast that I do as well with Frankie from the Doing It for the Kids community. So if you too are freelancing around family life, then wherever you found this podcast, search for Doing It for the Kids and make sure you're listening to that as well. We're heading towards episode 100 with Doing It for the Kids, but here we are with episode 300. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening, and for those who join live, for joining live. Liz, thank you so much, and all the best being freelance.
Thank you so much for having me.
There goes episode 300, everyone.